can do it correctly. Yes. All right, I'm also gonna share my screen for the introductory comments. We had a little bit of difficulty figuring out captioning and live captioning, so I figured for accessibility purposes, I'll just go ahead and share the text just so you all can see, at least for this introduction. That should be coming online any minute now. Could one of my colleagues give me a thumbs up that you can see the big push record button there? Yep. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. As you are aware, this is the Immersive Scholar Symposium on Data, Surveillance, and Privacy. NC State University Libraries are happy to welcome you to this event. I'll encourage you to review our symposium code of conduct, which will be pasted in the chat. And I'm going to click over to it right here, so just we can skim it all together. This was included in your reminder email yesterday if you would like to pull it up. As this is an online event, I just want to remind everyone that we are doing our best to treat others with respect and consideration. We do have an incident response policy. You can feel free to email me directly, or we do have a confidential reporting form that you are welcome to use. Any violations of the code of conduct can be reported to me as the host or through that form. I'll also take a moment that I want to honor the land that NC State University sits on. This was a land that was originally stewarded by two indigenous nations, the Tuscarora and the Catawba. We honor these nations today by recognizing that this institution of higher ed is built on land stolen from those who were here before the colonizers arrived. Additionally, this land has borne witness to over 400 years of the enslavement, torture, and systemic mistreatment of African people and their descendants. We honor these people today by recognizing them in order to break the cycle of colonization and the continued erasure of indigenous and Black peoples. We must acknowledge the history of the spaces and places we occupy to both understand and unlearn the many ways that we have been socialized. Also included in the chat in just a second will be a link to this U.S. Department of Arts and Culture's Honor Native Land Resources page. And I commend that to you all as a useful guide for personal action. As I mentioned earlier, we are recording this session. We'll also be monitoring the Q&A queue as well as the chat. So you should feel free to use either of those throughout the panel and then throughout the presentation in the second half. So very brief context about the Immersive Scholar Project, which has brought us all here today. Immersive Scholar is a 3-year grant generously supported by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. We just want to make sure to thank them for their support. We're actually coming to the end of the grant this month, so it's been a great opportunity for us here at NC State Libraries along with our cohort partners. The grant has sought to develop extensible models and programs for the development and dissemination of digital experiential scholarship, especially in large-scale and immersive visualization environments. This project has also aimed to increase the impact of the academic visualization environments and the scholarship created within them. Over the course of these 3 years in the grant, we've explored topics and produced works on the Me Too movement, food and housing insecurity of our students here at NC State University, and about humanity's complex relationship with water. On the heels of the global pandemic, we had the opportunity and we thought the responsibility to continue to engage with these cultural moments. As it became clear that that contact tracing specifically was a practice that would be employed for public health, I was asking questions about what is the delicate balance between data sharing for the public good and individual privacy as a human right. And further, how can we simultaneously resist surveillance and weaponization of data while inviting our patrons here at the library and our community on campus specifically to thoughtful engagement with difficult and world-changing practices. So through that thought process and in the concluding months of the grant, we partnered with Joelle, Dietrick, and Owen Mundy, who you'll hear from in just a second, on a project that has begun with this video trailer that I'm going to go ahead and play now.
The internet is a real marvel. but it also feels wrong. Everywhere you go, you are being watched. And once they have your data, they'll use it to convince you what to buy, how to feel, and even how to vote. It's hard to keep your data safe, but don't lose hope. There's a way to stop them, and it's up to you. By installing Tally in your browser, you can battle the trackers, and you can stop them from using your data against you. It's time. It's time to save the internet. Download Tally today.
All right, so at the conclusion of the Immersive Scholar project, we had the opportunity to partner with Sneakaway Studios to create an immersive visualization based on Tally Saves the Internet and the data around that project. You'll hear much more about that later. I want to go ahead and start with panelist introduction. So I'm going to go ahead and call on each of you. Feel free to introduce yourself, and then I'll go ahead and call on them next. So Lauren, if you don't mind unmuting and introducing yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Klein. I'm an associate professor in the departments of English and Quantitative Theory and Methods at Emory University. I also direct the Digital Humanities Lab there. And I think the reason why I'm here is that I recently wrote a book co-authored with a colleague of mine, Catherine D'Ignazio at MIT, called Data Feminism, which talks about data and data practices and sort of the imbalances of power in data and data practices that affect things like security and access to information. And I should also say, it's too bad, well, we live in coronavirus times, so this wouldn't have happened anyway, but on this weekend, I will be driving straight up 85 in a 16-hour drive to go see my parents. So I'll wave from the car to those of you in the Research Triangle and think of this time.
Great, thank you for being with us, Lauren. Joelle, would you mind unmuting and introducing yourself?
Sure, I'm Joelle Dietrick. I'm an artist, part of Sneakaway studio with Owen Mundy, and also an assistant professor of art and digital studies at Davidson College. And I'm a huge fan of Lauren's book and really enjoyed her reading group this summer, or actually it was in the spring, really, right? So April, May. And when we were also isolated, and also to see her daughter jump into the Zoom just now, it flashes me back to some of those reading group meetings, which were amazing and just, yeah, gave me hope. So that's why you're here.
Great, thank you. Nick, would you mind unmuting and introducing?
Sure, my name is Nick Merrill. I direct the Daylight Security Research Lab at the UC Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. You know, at a really high level, kind of my background spans kind of traditional cybersecurity and design research. So, you know, our research is really trying to focus on the design dimensions of security, especially how people understand and make sense of security, how people represent it and pass it on. And I personally use a big tent kind of notion of security that includes all of these thorny socio-technical problems, kind of the gendered nature of a lot of security risks, and I include privacy very much in that.
Great, thanks, Nick. And finally, Owen.
Thanks, Mecca. Hi, I'm Owen Mundy. I'm the other half of Sneakaway Studio. I am an associate professor of the practice in digital studies at Davidson College. I've been working in surveillance for a long time. I was in the Navy a long time ago, and I unloaded surveillance film on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier and processed aerial surveillance photography. And that's where I got my start in image making and thinking about surveillance. And just as my position now is, completely automated and privatized, drones, I've kind of followed the trend of the automation and use of surveillance for control from the government through the private sector in a lot of my research, and the things that I design, the things that I program, and the things that I write and think about. So I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Owen. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Hannah, to guide us through a discussion. Hannah, to you.
Thank you, Micah. I'm very excited to be here with you all today to have this discussion. My name's Hannah Rainey. I'm a librarian at NC State University Libraries. And I joined the organization in 2016 as a NCSU Libraries Fellow. And part of my role as a fellow was working on an internal cybersecurity audit of our data. So the data that we generate and that we store in-house. And so for 2 years, I was really steeped in a lot of these conversations, and libraries have traditionally held privacy as a major priority, particularly in protecting intellectual freedom, but recognizing that the sort of access landscape has really expanded and shifted and is so complex now. So it's great to continue to have these conversations and sort of grapple with some of these areas. So I'll be moderating this discussion with our fine panelists, and want to say that the chat is active for all participants. We also, if you have a question for the panelists, please use the Q&A feature. I'll turn over the time about 15 minutes till 2 p.m. To my colleague, Ashley Evans-Bandy, to ask some questions from participants. But please utilize the chat as we go through. Just be aware that we'd like to stay on topic and to keep the conversation on the chat relevant to the conversation we're having on your screen. And without further ado, I think we'll get started. So I have a set of questions. I think we'll start sort of broadly with some framing of the area, the problem space, and then get further into some approaches, and then maybe more specifically about some actions or imagining solutions. And so the first question I'd like to ask, and this is for everyone, but I'd like to start with Lauren, because it is inspired by the first chapter of Data Feminism. And the question is, how are data and power related? And how does that relationship impact privacy?
Yeah, well, I mean, that is the question, right? I mean, I think, first of all, thank you. And I'm honored that you would think that I should be the one to frame this discussion, because I think that everyone here is going to bring really valuable perspectives. But I'll say this, I mean, I feel like at root, data is, questions about data are questions about power, right? Data holds tremendous currency in the world today. It is the evidence that tends to carry the most weight in so many governmental, institutional, educational policies. And yet that power is wielded very unevenly, right? You need to have incredible resources, both monetary, infrastructural, and technical, in order to create and process data, to identify data that can be collected. You need to have the power to ask which data are collected and which are not, and then sort of decide which decisions are made and whose interests are being served by pursuing those particular questions or data collection practices, and which ones are not. And so, unfortunately, and we say this in the book, actually, while data and the role that it plays in society now is sort of a thing that we are still coming to terms with and is relatively new in the history of the ways in which policy decisions and all sorts of decisions are being made. The inequalities that it amplifies, these are not new, right? You know, these are the same old instances of power imbalances that have existed for, you know, for a very long time. You know, yeah, so maybe I'll sort of stop there and see what other people have to say.
Thank you, Lauren. Would any of our other panelists like to respond to that very broad and heavy question about what is the relationship between power and data?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with everything Lauren said. I think, you know, data and power have always been entangled, and really data only has meaning insofar as it hooks in to these existing vectors of power. Otherwise, is it data?
Is it data if it doesn't have power? That's really interesting. It's interesting to think about the metaphor that a lot of people use today, which is that data is the new oil, and to think about the reason why oil had power, you know, because it didn't have power for anybody before the invention of the car and the internal combustion engine, and then all of a sudden it provided power, and then it made a lot of people very wealthy and ruined a lot of countries. And I would say I totally agree with everything Lauren put out there as well. And I think it's a central question. And when so I have a class called Surveillance Culture, and the first thing we do is look at the etymology. And the word surveillance is rooted in French, and it means to watch from above. And so most of the time when you think of surveillance in cultural media, it's this, you know, creeper or big brother or somebody. And the important part that I think is the hardest part to grasp is the power part, because that watching from above is essential. And so when you think about, or at least when I think about the way that the data has power and that surveillance has power. Today, data is essential, but data is really just a feedback mechanism. It's the way that we're watched. It's the way that the surveillance economy operates. And then it folds in all the other stuff that's always been going on. Like Lauren said, the same old power structures are still here. They're still using propaganda. They're still using emotional advertising. They're still using behavioral psychology in the Skinner box. And now they're just folding in a very immediate and specific and massive feedback mechanism in order to fine tune the controls on the use of the data for power.
Joelle, would you like to add your thought?
I mean, I think this we all sort of know that we're being watched and manipulated in this way. And I think, I mean, I guess I'm curious, maybe it's a question for Lauren related to this. Like, I enjoy having this conversation focus a little bit more on like how to proactively go forward, you know, how can we envision a new internet? And I remember like when I was reading Data Feminism this summer, Lauren, you had that chapter, I think it's chapter 3, where it's like elevate emotion. I mean, one of the things that Tally wanted to do was that we normally go to search on the web and everything's sort of like under the hood, like we don't see it. Like for, you know, decades, we've thought that minimalist design, like if design disappears, like that's good design, right? So, I mean, one of the things Tally tries to do is to, make people aware of that under the hood stuff. So that they can like be more critical and actively fight it. So I'm just curious, Lauren, if you have any thoughts on that front, I guess.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, and I'm honored that someone who works in art and design actually, who is trained in that, actually finds resonance with their work. You know, I think that connects a little bit to what Nick said earlier. This like, is it data? Is it data if it doesn't have power? That kind of question. And I think that, and it's sort of combined with your question about like what we can do, right? You know, it's interesting, like there's all these metaphors about that are brought up with data and that also, you know, work with power that are so easily applied. And we say this in the book, that data really is this double-edged sword, right? You know, because data has power, you need to be wary of it and be very mindful of how you enlist it in support of your very, you know, whatever your goals may be, you being anyone. But that power also has potentiality, right? And so if you deliberately, in the example of Tally, sort of design a game intentionally that is trying to activate certain ideas and questions that have not necessarily been activated by dominant perspectives, you can also recognize the gift and privilege that you have as someone who can work with data to sort of redeploy power. And you see this, I mean, you know, in discussions about surveillance too. Are you saying hello?
Hello.
Okay. You know, the arguments about surveillance or counterveillance, right? And many of the same language you actually see now coming to be associated with data. You see, yet? I'm not finished yet. No, this is going on for a while, so I recommend you go back upstairs. You know, questions about like counter data, you know, counter data collection, being able to sort of use data to speak back to structures of power, things like this. And I sort of wonder if there is not a fair amount of learning that can take place from sort of people who have spent time studying both of these areas and bringing them in closer dialogue.
Thank you. Joelle, appreciate the like inclination to think about like proactively and generatively, what can we do? But I do want to, like, for our audience, because, you know, I think some of us are coming to this area not having a grounding necessarily in all of the intricacies of the issue. I want to ask a few more questions for framing. And this one, I think I'd like to start with Nick in thinking about this tension between security and privacy that can arise, especially when you're thinking of surveillance, because surveillance is often, if we're thinking about it in terms of government surveillance, is often in the name of security. So thinking about that and how this relationship and possibly tension is addressed in your research and your work, and how you've seen it addressed in the work of others that you collaborate with.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. You know, I really appreciate the, you know, kind of intuition that there is a trade-off between surveillance and privacy. I would contest the premise of the question, just insofar as, first of all, I think that privacy and security are impossible to separate. They are entangled. Privacy is what we call security for someone else, right? But privacy and security are really just kind of all the same big ball of wax, and really security, and that's why I just use the word security for everything. It's situated in personal goals. If you're a nation state, maybe surveilling your, you know, your citizens or people who aren't your citizens are part of security for you, or for, you know, you're maintaining your institutions. If you're a private citizen, maybe, you know, evading that surveillance can be part of your goals some of the time, depending on what you're doing. Sometimes evading that surveillance is itself, you know, raising awareness. There's some great anecdotes of people using Tor, and just the fact that they are emitting Tor traffic makes them intrinsically suspicious. Look up Harvard bomb threat if you want to like put the anecdote on that. So really, it's about these you know, socially situated goals, and we together collectively kind of negotiate how we're going to use these tools available to us to achieve our shared goals and our individual goals, and it's an ongoing negotiation. And these play out in the context of all of these ongoing negotiations between the existing power structures. You know, popping back to the last question, you have data, and what's the antithesis of data? It's noise. Noise, but really data and noise, they're all quantitative, they're all numbers. We call it noise when it doesn't cohere to our cultural narratives. And, you know, these cultural narratives are the thing we're interrogating. So really it's about the cultural narratives and the cultural goals and less about security and privacy per se. So that's what our work interrogates. Roundabout way of answering your question.
No, that was a great answer. I mean, I appreciate that it is, you're identifying that it's, you know, we could interchange these concepts with other things. What we're really talking about are these structures. And to that end, I think something that I've sort of been hearing, and I think there's an interview, a podcast interview with Shoshana Zuboff, who's the author of The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, and talking about privacy as this traditionally viewed as an individual right, a personal right. It's about having protection or security over personal things. But there is something about contemporary technology and marketing infrastructure that has shifted privacy from a personal issue to a collective one. And I'm going to open that up to all four of you to respond to and talk about how, what it is in this infrastructure that has shifted that from a personal to a collective issue.
I hate to be this guy again. I would again contest the premise of the question. I do not think that anything contemporary has shifted this. I think privacy has always been a collective issue. It's always been negotiated in larger collective contexts. I don't think there's ever actually been a time when privacy was an individual right. I think it came to be viewed as an individual right, you know, and it comes along with these Enlightenment ideals, and these were applied during the 20th century with the, you know, rise of mass communications. Maybe photography and filming in public kind of pumped this intuition of privacy as a right that pertains to the individual. It was convenient in the US legal system. I think the reality has always been fuzzier. I am thankful that contemporary changes to kind of surveillance infrastructures have made that more obvious. And now we can return to the way it has always been in our discussion of this kind of, you know, social value and collective value of privacy and security.
I would say, I think that was a great answer, Nick. I think I haven't really, I was thinking about that question earlier in that, and I was like, is it collective? But of course it is, because we're all human beings and we all have our private space and our private moments and our private thoughts. And I think that it's interesting you mentioned photography, because you know the kind of famous paper, The Right to Privacy, was really a response to that, the rise of that technology and the ability for the wealthy, these elites, to suddenly be photographed doing, you know, things that they were embarrassed by. And I think that, and like you, I'm also really happy to see that you know, the EU has made privacy a central human right, and that is echoing, that belief is echoing in their laws, and that their laws are hopefully influencing the largest companies in the world to start to at least look at the limits to which they can extract and analyze and make our data actionable. I think one of the things that makes privacy really interesting is that it's unique to all of us. We, even in this space right here, just the visible participants, we all have different expectations of privacy. In the exact same context, we'll have different beliefs and want different things, and so it's and that makes it hard to legislate. It makes it hard to make a collective rule when we all collectively want it, but want it our way. I think that you know, it comes down to this, again, this question, the first question, which is about power and feeling like we have some power, some agency over what we say and what we think. And the thing that, one of the things that I think the question about privacy doesn't ask is how do the interfaces that were provided, whether it's the software interfaces or the framing from a photograph, how does privacy, how does our expectation of privacy change by kind of what's been given to us? You know, how how does our expectation of privacy and our movement throughout the world change, and including what we're allowed to think? That's kind of a reference to Orwell and the way that or Foucault and this idea of the technologies of the self, where people internalize thanks to things like the panopticon or other types of power structures, and people internalize the actual change and they disallow themselves to say or even believe or think something in their own mind, thanks to the reality that we're given. That's a comment, not a question. I wish I had a question to pose it, to pass it to someone, but just answer the question you wish you were asked, Joelle or Lauren.
I was just going to say, as another concrete example, I mean, this morning I was reading about contact tracing through the use of iPhone, or phone geolocational data, and how we're trying to negotiate, how governments are trying to figure that out. I don't know. That's just one as a concrete example I wanted to bring up. Why it's timely.
Yeah, that's an example that I think is really fascinating, because it's one that, we all can agree sort of meets a pressing social need and yet is incredibly fraught. And the example that I was thinking of, it's actually connected to the contact tracing one, and especially to this idea that this assumption that the phone is the best unit through which to contact trace, right? That there is this one-to-one relationship between individuals and their phones, which presumes certain things about access to technology, persistence of phone number, things like this. The example that I was thinking about through this previous discussion is the type of work that Virginia Eubanks talks about and automating inequality, about access to social services, and how we're really, when we talk about us and we and privacy, there isn't really a universal we, and not everyone has access or the ability to exert or express or demand the same degree of privacy as others. And just to back up, if you're not familiar with the story, so she does a lot of work with child protective services, and there at a certain point in Pennsylvania, they implemented some sort of algorithm to automatically flag families where they thought child abuse might be taking place. But how they did it was they just sort of pulled in all of the data that they could find that was publicly available or available within state data infrastructures. So this includes access to federally or state funded counseling, SNAP benefits, all the things that you need to give up your data in order to receive something that you need for your family. And the end result was that it flagged many more poor parents and poor families than rich families, simply because there was more data on those families because they had been required to create data on themselves in order to live. And she has this incredibly resonant line: the algorithm confuses poor parents with poor parenting. And that, in her book is totally worthwhile, and, you should absolutely go read it. But I think what that helps to illustrate is, the point that in an ideal world, we would all be able to enact or live through the degree of privacy that we individually and collectively as a family, as a community, or whatever wanted. But the reality is that is not true, and different groups of people are forced to make concessions that go against either their personal or communal beliefs, because, again, because of the unequal distribution of power and resources that we have. And it's just, I think privacy, it's to me, it's really complicated, because so I would say two sort of general provocations, and I actually am not a privacy expert, so I'm really curious to hear what all of you think. But privacy is both an incredible privilege, sort of the ability to focus on that and expect that. Not everyone, because of their situation in life, can go through life believing that. And it also makes me think about the degree to which privacy is, as Nick said earlier, sort of this Enlightenment ideal, and therefore carries with it all of the biases of the Enlightenment itself. You know, it's centered on the white, Anglo, male, privileged subject. And there are certain communities in which privacy is either, you know, privacy is sort of at odds with collectivity and the type of work and living that certain groups want. And there are also ways in which privacy, I think, is pretty complicated and may be enacted, may have different dimensions than the sort of dominant sort of Anglo-Western view of privacy, which is like the boundary between the unitary self and information about that self. I mean, I think of all of the work that's been done in Indigenous communities, and actually digital projects either coming from or in connection with Indigenous communities that have more of like a temporal connection or a temporal of privacy and disclosure. This idea that, you know, there's sort of your starting point in time is a presumption of where like knowledge inheres within you, but over time and transaction and trust, like the privacy circle expands. And so, you know, again, this is also more of a comment than a question, but I just sort of wanted to put a little pressure on the sort of structuring concept for this discussion and just point out that there are sort of different ways and different circumstances in which this idea that we've sort of, our starting point has been like, we all mean the same thing when we're talking about privacy, but I think that that's not necessarily true.
It reminds me, again, referring to the data feminism book, of the sort of the part where you talk about embracing pluralism as a core sort of tenet of data feminism. And so I think I'd like to sort of focus us toward the direction of different approaches, right? Given fully understanding that like privacy, even as a concept, is understood differently depending on our context, depending on where we are in the history of our culture and like where we are situated within that culture. But speaking from your work, and I think I'd like to start with Joelle, if that's okay. This idea of embracing pluralism as an approach to engaging with privacy with users. So your work as an artist, but also your work as a researcher and collaborating with Owen, and how the approach is very interdisciplinary. I'd like to hear more about the importance of embracing pluralism in engaging with these topics.
Sure. I mean, I would say that Owen and I, as artists, we've always been interested in engaging with non-art audiences. So like Owen started a group in Indiana that they would put art on billboards, or even like us shifting into games. It was very much about like not just hanging things in galleries where only a few people would pass by, but ambitiously releasing this game where anyone that has access to a screen could try it, or if they don't have a screen, that it's being shown in a couple different venues that they could stop by. So I think that's always been important to us. We both come from working class backgrounds, so we are always very interested in how people that don't have, you know, that they're starting to use these tools online, but they don't have a very thorough understanding of how they're built, that we could offer them some sort of like artistic intervention that would help them think about those tools more critically. So that's the first thing I thought of as far as pluralism. Owen, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you said it really well, Joelle. I've been thinking a lot today in preparation for this about how Tally Saves the Internet is and like you said, all of the things that we've done, most of the things we've done leading up to it, are these attempts to have a dialogue that and it's a kind of constant process where we you know, we imagine, you know, this kind of like space. There's this really great, it's called the Logo for Net Art. It was like 1997. It's this animated GIF, you can Google it. it's just two computers with this line between them showing them network and like a lightning bolt in the middle that says art happens here. And, you know, and I think that's true. I mean, if you walk into a gallery, you see, you know, any kind of cultural production, whether it's literature, film, you know, we all kind of bring our own baggage and bring our own context to that thing that we see, and understand it through that lens or multiple lenses. And I think that we've always tried to be open and when we produce something to allow some kind of feedback to happen and influence the work and specifically create those spaces where we learn. And I mean, even now it's happening. I'm like seriously kicking myself. I have not thought very deeply about the question of privacy and privilege that Lauren brought up, and now I'm just like, yeah, it's amazing. I can also think of other examples of, especially with the court system, and like, you know, it's usually a work to right state or a right to work state and somebody at the state level has got a buddy who runs a software company, and they say, oh, we need to make some software that does, you know, X. And instantly, like in Louisiana, they're like, oh, well, we're going to use our new automated software to determine your sentence. Oh, and you're Black. Well, I guess you're going to be in a long time. And, you know, there are dozens of these examples. And the one that Lauren brought up is really, really powerful. But to circle back around to this original question, which is how we think about multiple audiences. The question was about pluralism, but I'm going to answer it based on what I know. I think I'm really eager to see how people respond to Tally Saves the Internet, and I really like. We've learned so much. Like the project we did in Alabama, we showed up and we were like, hey, we're going to make an artwork with the community, and we thought we'd done a lot of research leading up to, you know, what it's like to live in Hale County, Alabama, and we learned a lot in that process, and I feel really fortunate and kind of privileged to be able to do that.
And I think with Tally, the fact that it's a browser extension, you have to know how to download that and all of those things. You need to have like a computer. I mean, I think, you know, in retrospect, I think we would like to have it on some sort of like mobile device so that it would have access to a greater community, but it's sort of like had to go into the direction it was to get started. And I don't know if Owen wants to talk about that a little bit more, but we do think about audience and trying to widen the audience.
Yeah, I will, because I have to. It's I mean, the core concept is that is this idea of viewing the source, not the project of Tally, but the kind of the implementation of the browser extension, and it's that everybody who's ever worked with a piece of software or code or done something. Hopefully has had that wonderful hello world experience. And it's that moment, it's like in The Wizard of Oz where you look behind the curtain and all of a sudden you can see that, you know, your reality is made up of just a bunch of lines of code, and that it's, you know, for a good portion of the world who understands English is like, you can just read it right there. And so Tally had to be a browser extension so that we could operate on top of the space and kind of manipulate the space that people have become accustomed to expecting to tell them to be consumers and to show them ads. And then of course, if we were going to block a tracker in that space as a real reward that you earn in the game, then of course that would also be the case.
So I have a question for everyone, but I think this relates to thinking about tally as an example of an approach to engaging in this area. And I appreciate everyone, Nick in particular, for pointing out that it's like not a simple binary, that our concepts of privacy and security and are all more complex when taken into account with these conversations and awareness of power structures. But oftentimes the sort of surface level take on privacy is that it's currently a technical problem and needs technical solutions. And so what are some of the major pitfalls that you have witnessed or experienced with technical solutions for these big sort of societal problems?
I've got one. People are, I guess other, so, okay, the one that always comes to mind, it's from someone I really admire. Her name's Diana Freed. She's at Cornell Tech. She works with survivors of domestic violence. And her work is, it's really about helping survivors of domestic violence. Of course, that's the essential aspect, but reading it from a design perspective, it shows how the way that technical people think about security, these abstract Bob and Alice scenarios, really map onto a stranger who doesn't know you, attacking you over the internet. And when it comes to an attacker who knows you really well, it doesn't, the models start to fall apart. So for me, it's not so much, oh, the technical solutions don't work. It's that the technical solutions are embedded in this culture that produces ways of seeing that fail. So we're about changing the culture. Technical stuff, it's already wrapped up in these things, but it's about the culture. It's about the culture. It's about the way that the culture sees these professional ways of seeing. There's this great Charles Goodwin piece, Professional Vision, which is always timely. But it's really about how our training makes us see the world in particular ways. And I think security is trapped in this very old school, very militaristic, 1970s way of seeing. And, daylight, we call it daylight in part because we're interested in seeing in new ways.
I want to give a plug for some other browser extensions that I think that like, so I don't know if anyone here has heard of Ben Grosser's. He made a few different browser extensions. One is called Facebook Demetricator, and he has a Twitter Demetricator as well. And the basic argument around that, so what it does, you install it, and all it does is remove the metrics, you can still like things, but you just can't see the numbers. You can't be influenced by the kind of like, you're not going to get the dopamine release that the Skinner box proof we all get when you're getting attention from other people, and you're also not going to be influenced to like something or buy something. So it removes the what's it called, the psychological mechanism that rating systems and canned laughter give us. It's the pressure from a crowd to believe that something is good just because every other person believes it's good. And those are both browser extensions. There's another one he made called SafeBook, which it takes all the text out of SafeBook, but it leaves the images. And I think that it's interesting when I think about them in the context within which Nick was just speaking, to think about them as security tools, or they're like, they somehow kind of reclaim your own security kind of in that moment. I'm so grateful for browser extensions or the ability that we, still have, thankfully, to manipulate the space of the web, and not be kind of perfectly bound by the kind of the profit, the goals for profit that these companies have that produce these things.
Well, I've been told that we can go a little over time too, because this discussion is so fruitful. I'm learning a lot, and have a lot of things that I want to start to re-examine in my own work. I want to open it up. I have a last question for you, and then we'll open it to some audience questions. But is there anything that any of you as panelists would like to share in talking about this space and your approach to it, or other considerations that have not yet been shared?
I mean, my big thing is just, my message to the world is just call it security. People hedge, they say, oh, it's privacy, oh, it's kind of an art intervention. Just call it security. When we discursively kind of stretch this term, it's good. So don't feel like you're not qualified to say, I'm doing security, I'm working in security. You're doing security. If you're afraid that a computer is going to hurt you, you're working in security. That's all.
I think that I just want to make sure that we get a chance to talk about the work of the Our Data Bodies project. I have no connection with them, but just when I'm thinking about sort of grassroots community-based educational efforts oriented around privacy and security, I feel like they're doing some of the best work that can be. I'm just going to put a link in here. And it's this collaboration between academic researchers, community organizers, and people in communities where they sort of hold workshops and try to build sort of a community literacy project, but sort of coming from issues and concerns raised by members in particular communities. And I just feel like it's a really good model for sort of how we might think about whether it's security or privacy, sort of what these terms mean to, especially to communities that are often the most, have their privacy the most compromised, or sort of have the least control over their privacy, and then also sort of experience security as a process of keeping them out or securing the interests of other people rather than sort of a broader, more conceptual version of security, which is sort of a social good.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, we'll get to hear from Joelle and Owen in a bit more detail about their project. I am going to turn it over to my colleague and co-organizer Ashley Evans-Bandy to share some questions that came in through the chat.
Yeah, a couple did come through the chat. The first one is, would it be feasible for the US to enact similar legislation to the EU's right to be left alone, or are we too immersed in the surveillance economy?
Here in California, we do have the CCPA, which gives Californians a right to be forgotten. On the ballot in November, please vote. On the ballot in November, there's a proposition to expand those rights to kind of prevent companies from dodging fines, which they've been doing. But it's possible, I don't know why here and not other places. Maybe it's because we live in the shadow of Silicon Valley. Like, I think for a lot of people, tech is abstract, it's omnipresent, but like when tech is going well, like my rent goes up, and maybe that, makes people more skeptical or suspicious. But yeah, no, we can do it. We can do it.
I think I just add into that. This is actually less about the right to be forgotten, more just generally about the GDPR. That one of the really interesting things that happened is that those laws were passed without any sense of how they would actually be implemented. They were almost like rhetorical laws that people got behind, and then the countries had to figure out, and the EU had to figure out, like, how do we go ahead and do this? And, I feel like, I feel like, I think my view on this has changed, but now I think that actually is a really powerful way of legislating, to sort of say, like, this is a thing that we want to happen, and we're going to make it so that it can be voted upon, even if we don't yet know how it will be implemented. And I would love to see, and I'm not sure that our political process works the same way here, but I would love to see in general, and again, I'm sort of like saying this, and I'm sure that there are reasons why this is a bad idea, but I'm not a legal scholar, so I'll just go say it. But it seems to me like it would be wonderful to have legislation that is more sort of rhetorical and ideological and sort of aspirational, shall we say, rather than sort of working from like the practicalities of like, well, how is this going to work? What we need to like get every single, you know, I dotted and T crossed before we are able to vote on this very specific thing.
I believe that the way that the EU operates, and the way you just described it, Lauren, is perfect. They operate more from an ideological perspective, and they're less concerned with like how the oil lobby is going to take this new rule, you know. And so it's like, if we could go back in time into the late 1700s and you know, and go, oh, they're operating from this very ideological perspective. Well, let's see how it plays out in 200 or 300 years. And, you know, like we see now that, you know, the structure that a bunch of rich white slave owners gave us is, you know, ideologically it works pretty good, but there are a lot of failures in it too. That, you know, they didn't imagine how much money could enter into government and just completely ruin it. And you know, and when you look at the lack of privacy laws here, I mean, sure, our video rentals are protected, and our health data, and if you're a minor, but once something leaves your house and it's not one of those things, there are very few rules that you can, very few things you can do about that data, and it's because Facebook and Google have an enormous lobbying organization, and they're dumping tons of cash on the politicians who are making the rules or choosing not to make the rules. And so I really like, I like how Lauren put the way that the EU operates, because all those member states have to adopt the Constitution. Unlike in the United States, where they can go, well, we're gonna do what we want, states' rights, and then they have to figure it out. And there have been a lot of critics about the GDPR and its kind of lack of concrete implementation. And I'm with you. I think it's a positive that doesn't exist, because what it did is it forced Facebook and Google and the big companies to take a new approach to the way that they think about treating their users. And the EU is so massive that they had to just kind of, instead of making special rules for their software, they were like, well, it'd be a lot easier if we just made this rule for everybody, instead of putting a whole bunch of if statements in our code. And so to me, the laws in the United States aren't gonna do they're not gonna save us. And I think that's why Joelle and I think that's why cultural production is, and these kinds of conversations are essential, because you can get a lot more done by engaging someone in a playful activity, and so that they're doing the work of thinking about something technically complex, but they don't really know it because they're having fun while they do it. Sorry, I forgot to pass it to somebody again. Ashley, so what's the next question?
No worries at all. So the next question is, can privacy also be a neoliberal tool? We've seen a lot of social movements in recent years be fueled by removing the idea that certain experiences are shameful and should be kept private. I wonder if there is a way in which reflexively insisting on data privacy may be creating new closets.
I love this question. I think insofar as privacy becomes an individual right, it gets wrapped up in this libertarian kind of soup, where it's like, I'm going up against the big government because government is bad. And you know what? Collective action matters, and we don't want to protect ourselves necessarily systematically from collective action. And I do not subscribe to that kind of privacy. So I would give the question a thumbs up.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we talk a little bit about this in the book, not with respect to privacy, but in general, actually, we talk a little bit more with respect to transparency, actually, which is sort of like the obverse of privacy. And we suggest actually a word that you used in framing the question, that reflexivity is really the better and sort of more capacious approach to this, because it is never true that there is a universal, like a generic privacy setting or transparency setting that makes sense for all cases, right? And, you know, thinking about, you know, I absolutely should be thinking about these instances where you absolutely must remain, or you want to keep your information or your experience private because to come forward would do tremendous harm, versus the power that comes from coming forward with some information that, you know, other people want to keep private, right? But I think in general, sort of asking, again, these questions about interests, like whose interests are being served in whatever framework is being proposed as the generic good, and instead asking on a case-by-case basis, you know, what is the goal here? And I have to say, just in terms of the, you know, to bring it back to some of the stuff that the GDPR has brought about, you know, one of the things that I'm really liking is it's not as much about browser plugins, but all of the evolving cookie policies and how they're being presented to users. You know, it used to be like, you know, on day one of the GDPR, you had to just opt into cookies, opt out. But now I'm seeing some really interesting sort of disaggregated questions about, you know, whether it's like, do I want essential cookies? Do I want, you know, the ones that optimize? Do I want none? And then you see some qualitative descriptions, you know, that are like, these are the ones that do this, these are the ones that do that. And I do feel like that is, you know, it's educating at the same time that it is offering options and allowing people to know what they are, know what they're choosing. And I'm trying to think, I saw a really good one like just yesterday, and I was just thinking like, wow, like there's been a really interesting intellectual evolution and how this originally this like bureaucratic requirement was implemented, but it actually in some ways is having the effect that I think was intended, which is to get people thinking, or not even, they weren't thinking hard before, but like to know that they should be thinking about these kinds of questions when they, you know, load a page in their browser type thing.
Well, thank you. We have one more question here, and it is, where, when, and in what format does or should this kind of education happen? What are models you know of and their successes or shortcomings?
To me, so Lauren's point about the multiple options now on the cookie disclaimers and this distinction between essential and non-essential cookies, and the kind of like beginning and edging towards transparency education, I think is really great. And you know, the law and the interpretation of the law is making up for the fact that there's not a you know, we have the 3 R's at the grade school level, but there's not a very obvious like kind of technology literacy course that involves you know, the issues. We have a 9-year-old daughter, Joelle and I, and it still feels very much like stranger danger as far as the stuff that she's getting in at least in the public schools in North Carolina. And so yeah, like a little bit more transparency. It would be nice to see a little bit more transparency in terms of just, I don't know, media literacy, because for me, you know, the data side and the media, it's all kind of woven together. You know, like Facebook is like a data company, but they're really a mass media company, right? It's just that mass media has changed. And so like thinking about and questioning the intent of people and the intent of commercials, the intent of interfaces, the intent of the privacy or cookie disclaimer, and understanding like is somebody going to benefit from this decision that I'm about to make? I think for me, I think Paul asked that question. Paul, you know, it would happen, and probably for you too, because you have kids, I know. It would happen at the, you know, at the grade school level, so they can already start to process the decisions that they make, you know, even if they don't understand all of the complexity, they can start to at least begin to think about how technology is shaping our experience in the world.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking this time to be with us and have this discussion. I think we're a little over time in our schedule, but I'm glad that we did that. Thank you, Ashley, for fielding the questions from our participants. People can still continue to put questions into the Q&A in the chat, because there will be some time after Joelle and Owen's presentation to continue talking. So we are going to take a short break, 2-minute break, and we'll reconvene back at 2:10 to have a closer look at Tally Saves the Internet.
Hope you all are taking a quick break to grab a drink or move around. We'll start back in about a minute. All right, I think we will start to call folks back. Thank you all again for listening in, and thank you to Hannah and Ashley for moderating that first part. Really appreciate you all. For the second half or second bit of the symposium here, we're going to do we're going to ask Owen and Joelle to give a little more context about their project, Tally Saves the Internet, and the visualization work that they are prepared based on from that project that will be displayed in the future as part of a new immersive space at our library, right across the way from me here, called the Visualization Studio. So I'll drop a link to the Visualization Studio in the chat in just a second. Owen and Joelle, are you all around and ready?
Yeah, we are. Are you going to show that video that you posted of the walkthrough of the space?
I hadn't thought to. I could try to pull it up maybe after your presentation if people would be interested. I walked into the building today for the first time in months, and was able to kind of take a video on my phone of the Visualization Studio. So I'll pull that up and have it ready after y'all's presentation. But let me turn it over to you, Owen and Joelle, and thanks you all for being here. And as Hannah mentioned, please feel free to drop any questions in the chat or the Q&A, and then we'll have more time after presentation to have some more questions. Go ahead, folks.
Okay, Owen, can you give me a thumbs up if everything, okay, good. All right, so thanks again for everyone that attended and took this time on a Friday afternoon, especially our working parents. It's a really difficult time. And also thank you to NC State for hosting this panel. Micah and Hannah suggested that Owen and I give a brief 15-minute overview of Tally Saves the Internet with an in-progress report for our NC State project. So I've divided the presentation into 3 parts. First, a little bit about our game studio. Second, a little bit about the game Tally Saves the Internet. And then finally, our NC State data visualization. So, uh-oh. That's weird. I can't. I'm sorry. For some reason, I can't forward the slides.
Maybe I should share if it's
yeah,
not
why
working
don't
for
you? Yeah, it's not working for me, so I'll stop.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries.
I don't know what happened. It's strange.
Move. That is an old reference.
All right, can you get it?
Yeah.
All right, so next, slide 2.
All right, I got it. I am teaching on Zoom this semester and still have not figured it out. Let's see here. Present. Aha. Okay.
Okay. Can you forward? Oh, I did it earlier, but for some reason I can't do it right now. All right. So before I describe Tally, I'll briefly introduce ourselves and a little bit about our recent work. Owen and I met when we were in graduate school at the University of California, San Diego in 2005 and immediately started to collaborate. What you see here is a drawing made in the Netherlands by Rafaela Wang during the 2014 International Documentary Film Festival. That year, Owen had won an award for his online project, I Know Where Your Cat Lives. And before the festival, they asked him if he could use his Google searches to do this drawing. And indeed, we do have a daughter for which at the time we were buying robots. And we had a window of exactly those measurements. But we had no cats and I never wear high heels. So I'll let you connect the dots on those searches. So what do we do? Owen, if you could advance the slide. We make work about contemporary technology and automated systems. And sometimes those works are generative. In other words, they're driven by code to create infinite number of possibilities. And then other times they take the form of prints, videos, and games. So Owen, if you can forward. While we collaborate, we also create individual bodies of work. As the keywords at the top suggest, I gravitate more to painting, installation, and code. And Owen focuses more on code, data, software, installation, visualizations. And so about Tally Saves the Internet. Tally Saves the Internet is a browser extension that transforms the data that advertisers collect into a multiplayer game. Next. Here's the core game loop. First, the top, at the top it says that you can browse the web as you normally do. And then you find monsters. Tally detects and warns you when there's monsters lurking on the page. Third, you battle those monsters. Sometimes you have to dig for them, and then you defeat it in a turn-based battle. And fourth, you can explode the web once you capture those monsters. And not only that, but doing so, capturing the monsters blocks those trackers in the future. So next. So here is a 3-minute to sort of show you the game loop in action. So here I just went to 3 different websites. The first one was Art Papers. I was playing as given keyboard number 15. And you can see Art Papers, the tally turns orange. She lives in the bottom left-hand corner, turns orange, and then turns red when there's actually a product monster on the page. So if you click on the monster, you battle the monster in a turn-based style game, sort of like Pokemon. Yeah, you can see that there's different attacks that you can use. All of the attacks are orange and all of the defense are blue. And part of the game is sort of teaching people about some of the techniques that advertisers use. So like data corruption or triangulate. And here's another example where I'm playing this different player, Printer 37. And then she's looking for a design monster. She turns red. And then sometimes you have to actually scroll down the page to actually find the monster. So when you click on the monster, that again initiates the battle, and you can choose which of the attacks you want to use and which ones what defenses you want to use. So I think that's pretty good. Owen, if you want to go to the next page. All right, so to summarize, this game takes the entire web on as its canvas. It's incredibly ambitious, but we are hoping that it would transform the player's online experience into something that would remind them that everything about our current online experience is human-made, so therefore we can design it in different ways. And 2, it can be vastly improved so that it promotes healthier ways of being. So I just wanted to show you the leaderboard and how the game is like a multiplayer game. So you can see all the other players that are playing. Owen, if you could go to the next. This is, yeah, that was tracking, all your data over time. There's an anonymous name generator. So all the names, the player names are kind of fun, like Unlikely Scroller or Attractive Computer 42. And then on the next slide, you can see that there's, you can see what other people have done as far as, if they've blocked a monster, which monster they blocked, that they got different badges. If you go to the profile page, which is the next slide, again, you can see, based on like what you did today, the number of clicks or whatever today or month or all time. And then you can also see on the next slide, all the different badges that you collected. So for example, you can earn a big clicker or a long distance scroller badge. Both are references to how trackers collect your physical actions, or the FOMO badge, which you can earn for using websites that employ such psychological manipulation. On the next page, at the bottom of your attacks and defenses, there's a pie chart with product marketing categories to give you a sense of how algorithms match you to advertisements. And so, Owen, I'll let you take it from there.
Play. So this is a preview of all of the monsters in the game. It's a generative video. It just cycles through their monster IDs. We created this for exhibitions, and we showed it in the fall at Davidson College, actually. So each monster is actually representative of a category in the Internet Advertising Bureau's, or IAB's, product classification taxonomy. And we use this as a standard. It is a standard for that's used across the internet for what are they called? Real-time bidding auctions, the auctions that happen, as your web page is loading to determine what ad you'll see. So we took this standard and just downloaded this Excel spreadsheet and used it as a framework for all of the monsters. So the taxonomy ID is now a MID, a monster ID. And we added the game data that you see on the bottom left. So in this case, events and attractions is taxonomy, the tier 1, personal celebrations and life events, funeral. And so this is the funeral monster. And so then you can see the advertising keywords that we generated so that we can match people to the monsters and other game data in addition to the animations. And so this is the spreadsheet itself. There are over 700 categories in this massive taxonomy, and they publish their data along with other data and standards on like real-time bidding and audience taxonomies on GitHub. Actually, it's kind of fascinating. I think what's even more fascinating, and this is not in my notes, but while they have over 700 different categories, including beverages, they do not have a coffee category. And so, it's not totally complete. It doesn't have all the essentials. And so here you can see the tier 1 and tier 2 and so forth, and get a sense of how we're all, classified and sorted into these categories. And this is the color data. We have gradients and palettes to go with each of these categories, and all the color work in the game. All the dynamic visuals that you see are all thanks to Joelle. She's absolutely the color champ. So for each of the so there's we also have another series of spreadsheets that includes all the other game objects. That includes the attacks you can earn, the badges, dialogue, all the dialogue. I think there are like 400 lines of dialogue now that Tally says. The disguises. These are all encapsulated in this spreadsheet. And so what you're seeing is a list of the badges and the content that's all exported and automatically packaged inside the extension and the API. So attacks you earn and you use those in battles, and badges, Joelle mentioned those earlier, you earn those. The disguises are what are the glasses that Tally wears, and you have to earn those in battle. So if you beat a product monster and you block that monster, you might earn a disguise. And then later on, when Tally, your Tally in the game, starts wearing a disguise suddenly on a new website that you visit, that means she's detected that tracker that you previously blocked in a battle, and that she's blocking it currently. So if she's wearing the glasses, it's an active tracker blocker at that moment, thanks to your gameplay. And so here's a shot of some more nerd stuff. What you're seeing are the levels in the game and how we compared our levels to, say, the first version of Pokemon to work on our leveling up. Okay, so finally the visualization. And so first we wanted to show this picture. Micah had it behind him, and it's a mock-up for the 3D glasses, analog 3D glasses with the red and blue. And we had this idea last year to put it in the game, and we developed a bunch of monsters that are 3D. And we have some shaders in the visualization now that actively make all the objects 3D. And so so that's part of the game. It's a reference to the spectacle of the data surveillance economy, and to think about how things like Animoji and the Amazon Echo Tiger for kids are these kinds of distractions from what's really going on underneath the hood. So this is the current visualization. We made this morning. We have 3 videos, and so what you're seeing are a number of players. And this is in Unity, and it connects to the API. This is all anonymous data. You can see that it's basically just the username, the date or time the event happened, some other event about the game event. And so what you're seeing are a number of players, and every time one of them wiggles or jumps or swirls, that's an event. And so that means that they just got a new badge or they clicked something. And so what we're trying to show is a visualization of what's under the surface in the surveillance economy. I think it's really obvious, as Joelle said earlier, that everybody gets a sense that they're being tracked because they can see the same pair of shoes, follow them across the internet in pictures in the ads. But it's hard to make that tangible. It's hard to understand what's going on the surface, or not only the technology, but how pervasive it is. And so So this is an attempt to basically make a visualization that shows how people are tracked. And so each of these, what we've, are kind of like Nyan Cat inspired stripe rainbow patterns happening behind the various Tally avatars are color coded, and the color coding matches the advertising categories or the monster IDs that they've been tracked to. And so every time somebody clicks, we know what trackers are actually tracking them at the moment. And so these stripes are representative of those trackers. And so we're looking at the, the kind of 3D view, and I've got all the gizmos on so that you can see the pathfinding and the wandering algorithms. And so in this last video, it's another version of that. And you can see, I think I can click through and speed it up maybe. Eventually, in this video, you can see the monsters that we layer on top, the little animations that are happening. And so this piece is still in progress. We still get to add in sound that is still being developed by some of our former collaborators. And we still have to actually hook it up to the API because we're using test data here, and so it fetches a chunk of data, and then it visualizes it, but we have to basically make it live. And so here's where it adds in the monsters, and you can see all of the monster sprites. So right now it's pretty chaotic, and we're and now we're getting kind of at this point. This is what we imagined in our head when we started to work on this visualization, and so now we have to work on the aesthetics and all the frame rate, because it seriously drops. So we're going to have to do something about the draw calls in this thing. Okay, so wrapping up with just a couple of shots of all the of our credits page. We have received a number of different grants over the last couple of years developing this piece. We've been really fortunate to have so many awesome students at Davidson. We've been able to find grants to support in the summers to help us on this project, and we're really grateful for the support at Davidson College, and for the team at NCSU, Micah, Hannah, Scott, and Walt, and everybody else. Thank you. Joelle, did I miss anything?
I mean, I just wanted to say there's so many people to thank in support of this project, and including Locust Projects in Miami. Right now they are showing Tally as an exhibition. So I just wanted to send a huge thank you to them as well. And we're going to have like a virtual happy hour talking about like more behind the scenes stuff with the project on the 22nd with them. So yeah.
Great, so we have some time for Q&A now. Ashley, I think there may be a couple coming in that you have, and feel free to take those. If the questions start to die, I'm happy to show that video that I made this morning of the actual space called the Visualization Studio. So Ashley, over to you.
Yeah, I have a more technical question, and then I have a big picture philosophical question. Do you have a preference on which you'd like to answer first?
No, either one.
Okay, we will take the technical question first, which is, have you ever thought of not just blocking the trackers, but actually trying to provide them false data, and what that would take technically?
That's a great idea. No. So I mentioned earlier that my surveillance class, and we have a number of different projects. In the final project, they actually have to, they either have to write a piece about resistance to surveillance, or make a project about it. And the idea of noise comes up fairly regularly. And I think it's a really, I've been fortunate to hear the perspectives of students and think about it a bit. And I think that noise is a really excellent way to engage the problem of surveillance or security. And so I think that's a great idea. In terms of the tech, you know, so Tally is I would say it's a light tracker blocker. We're dependent upon some of the more established larger teams like Disconnect and Ghostery, and Disconnect specifically uses, they publish an open source list of all the trackers, and it's updated weekly. And you can find out whether or not you can, if you detect the URL of a tracker, the domain, you can then find out whether they are doing browser fingerprinting for surveillance, whether they're just an analytics tool, whether they're advertising and engaging in behavioral targeting. And then, so Tally, once you block it, Tally removes the reference so that it basically just breaks the code in there. And if you look, if you use Tally, you'll see, and you look in there, it replaces it with a special little message. In terms of supplying data, that's a really, I think, a technically difficult proposition, because over the recent years, the idea of CORS, which is, I always forget what it stands for, but it's a cross-origin resource something. And it basically says, I can't access resources on this domain unless I'm also on this domain. And it's a security rule that is built into all browsers now, or most. And so for me to supply data to a tracker that's built into a web page, we would need to, instead of sending data to their origin, we would need to change the data that they're collecting at that moment. And that would require all kinds of things. You know, if you make a list of the data, you have to get the URL and you have to get the player actions. And I could see how you could build a specific environment, you know, like the click farms that they have to manipulate ad revenue and likes. I could see how you could do that with and visit websites and supply noise as a dedicated thing. But I think it would interrupt the experience of the user to do that on the as a kind of like in Tally, which is I guess like a passive RPG tracker blocker, progressive tracker blocker. But I really like that idea. I think that's super cool, and I think that supplying noise is a really simple and accessible and useful strategy for combating the problem of the surveillance economy.
I have one other follow-up technical question that just came in a little bit ago, and it's from a former immersive scholar, which is, how did you choose example sites? For example, I understand Amazon, but how did you choose the art website?
Joelle?
Yeah, I mean, those are websites I go to, but also for strong documentation. I just thought it would be fun to like see some really beautifully well-designed sites. But it was interesting because sometimes I would go to sites that, like when I was thinking of well-designed sites, I was like, you know, Swiss design or German design or whatever. And a lot of those sites didn't have as many trackers. So I ended up having to backpedal and go to CNN or HuffPost, or, you know, I'd read a lot of New York Times articles about which sites had the most trackers. So as far as documentation, I did have to, it's a great question. I did have to like go to those sites that had the most trackers.
This is a different philosophical question I was initially going to ask, but this just came in, which I think is interesting, and it's sort of referring back to the panel earlier on the idea that privacy is socially constructed according to the individual and cultural norms, and if so, what notion of privacy is embodied by Tally?
Yeah, so it's been an ongoing question. it's a it's interesting because I've made 3 or 4 or maybe more software works about data privacy, and this one is definitely, to me, the funnest, thanks to collaborating with Joelle. In our conversations about this project, it was really important for us to not violate the user's privacy. And it's, when you want to make a work that that involves users and it gives them some kind of voice or some kind of function in the space, but at the same time you have to not like go against the goals of your project. And so originally it was just an RPG that operated on the internet, just like Pokemon Go, except you're on the internet. And it was this kind of back and forth that we would have about, which is like, well, are we telling them something they already know, or are we just kind of like, pouring fire or gas on the fire? Are we just kind of like making the problem worse by adding in this other thing that has the same problems? And so it's been an ongoing discussion, and we have a privacy policy. We have I'm familiar with the GDPR, so I've kind of gone down the list and made sure that we're providing transparency, letting people opt out. If you go into your dashboard, you can actually delete all of your data from the game and reset it and start from scratch. And that was also handy because for developing the game, it allowed us to like play from scratch again and see the onboarding and whatnot. So yeah. Oh, and then most recently, if you review our privacy policy, we just updated it because we published this for Chrome and all the Chromium browsers like Brave and Opera, but also Firefox. And the Firefox reviewers, the add-on reviewers, have been super helpful, giving us feedback, and also they have requirements to make sure that our privacy policy and our actions underneath the hood, because they can analyze our code, that the things that we are doing match what we say we're doing in our privacy policy, and that our privacy policy and the way that we allow or encourage people to opt in are consistent with the rules of the GDPR and their policies, which match that.
Okay, well, I think we have time for one last question, and I'm not seeing anything come in from anybody in the chat. So I'm going to, oh wait, no, I just saw one come in. What are some of your thoughts, approaches on using this as a teaching tool for 12 through K? Keep in mind the majority of this youngest generation are so used to the free app or service economy and not realizing the intangible data harvesting or hiding in the background.
I can take this one because my background's in education and I have a K through 12 teaching certificate. I mean, I think it would be amazing. Like, I mean, Owen jokes about me like inspiring a lot of the color and the playfulness, whatever, but I think also our daughter, just watching what she gets excited about. When we showed this project at Davidson, the art cart had organized these amazing, like sort of hands-on making monsters, like product monsters, which was really fun to get that sort of like away from the screen, but like actually physically making things and being creative, thinking about what they want, what they desire, and like turning that into a monster. That was kind of fun. But yeah, I think we published a paper. We didn't talk so much about the game mechanic where you can explode the web that happens at the end of every battle. But I think it's good for young kids to think about, that the interface is just that. It's an interface that's been designed by someone, and that they can think about it in other ways. And to introduce that early on is really fun. So those are my quick thoughts.
I want to add a plug for my other project, which is the CAT website. That I can only hope that Joelle and my project is it kind of achieves the same. So while the project went viral and it was kind of it was big in the media for a bit, it had this long tail where I would get emails from like the public officer on the police force in Wichita, Nebraska, or a school teacher in some place, or I would see traffic spikes and because it was included in some kind of like a learning management system in a elementary school, and so I think that was another of our core goals, which is that we have to make this accessible, we have to make it fun, and we have to allow multiple people to think of it and enter it in whatever way that they can do that in order to reach all of those people, and and make it extend not just out of art but out of academia and out of our kind of cultural bubble. And so we really hope that it has the same kind of resonance that other project did.
Great. And I think, Micah, did you have a quick question?
Yeah, this is maybe a little unfair insider baseball, but I'm wondering, since the visualization work that you all are building is a collaboration between our library and you all, and so you're designing for a physical environment, I'd love to hear what sort of practical, pragmatic decisions you've made about sort of conceptualizing and reimagining the game and the data for a physical space. And while you all talk, I'm going to put into the chat a link to the Visualization Studio, which, as you all are probably aware, we sort of launched this semester, but haven't really done much programming in because of health risks and concerns. And then I'll post also a link to the sort of quick walkthrough I did this morning. So people on the webinar can see the space that you all are making this thing for as you all talk through some of those practical and pragmatic decisions.
I mean, it was such a fun challenge, this idea that we would, I mean, I hope you all can click on that link and see the Visualization Studio. So it's a circular space, and then there's projections on all the walls. So you should be surrounded by projections of that last part of our presentation. And Owen and I, we had this idea of the avatars with the trails and maybe the product monsters attached, and we kept meeting with our NC State team, and it was such good discussions and really kept us focused on all the things we didn't think about. Hannah, at one point, I had presented like a very bright version of the visualization, and she was like, you might want to tone that down. We had also done ones that were like more purple, like mock-up style frames. And so that's eventually the direction we went. But it's been so fun this past week or so, where Owen had sort of like a breakthrough with he finally got in the Unity interface, and we would just sit there and watch those trails for forever. So I think it could be fun to have people that are using Tally sit in that space, like on the carpet with their laptop, and then, be clicking around and using Tally, and then seeing their avatar zoom around. I think it can be pretty mesmerizing. So we're excited to see that through. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Owen?
Well, this is my first virtual residency, and so far I think it's gone splendidly. I'm looking forward to walking through the space and experiencing it, and I'm looking forward to hopefully doing that as soon as the spring. Yeah, the space, the circular space is just so great. And I remember the conversation that sticks out to me the most through this process, which is really, really great to be able to jump on a call with Micah and your team and to get feedback on the ideas and to talk about it. And one of the conversations was around cycloramas. And so so what we did was we kind of tapped into our memory of previous experiences we had viewing artwork in the round, and thinking about how a motion would happen on that, or sound, so we were looking at images of undersea landscapes and space landscapes, and trying to imagine kind of a floating space, not cyberspace so much, but just a kind of like a virtual space. And so yeah, so it's been a really positive experience. I'm just so glad to get to work with you again, Micah, and to meet the team, and I'm really happy that we did this, and thanks again for organizing it. It's been a really great series of conversations and questions, and I've definitely taken more out of it than I put in.
We appreciate you all partnering with us. So I'm going to go ahead and shut us down for the day. I'm so appreciative to Owen and Joelle, and to Nick and Lauren, who had to exit a little bit earlier. Also want to say again, thank you to the Mellon Foundation for the funding that made all of this possible. I don't think I did this at the beginning, but the link to the larger project, immersivescholar.org, is in the chat now. I'd be personally happy if you all would go and click on that link and check out the site. We put a lot of, Mellon put a lot of money into it, and we put a lot of work into it. And in the coming months, Owen and Joelle's project will end up represented on this site as well. So again, thank you all for your time. Thank you to Ashley, Claire, and Hannah for pulling this thing off with us. I hope you all have a great weekend. I'll keep the room open for maybe the next 5 or 10 minutes if anyone does want to ask any more questions. Thank you, and have a great afternoon. Looks like folks are dropping out. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.